Okay, so my name is Sue Hanley, and we are here, and thank you very much for finding us at the very end of the hall, to talk about community. And so I wanted to just, first of all, we're a small group, and I want to make it as informal as possible, but if you guys can't come up with anything, any questions to ask or topics, I have cards. So going very old school, not even on my phone. And so I'm going to just ask everybody to kind of introduce themselves by telling a story about community. And so I asked them all to send me not the boring standard conference photo. And if bonus points, if the picture had something to do. Yeah,
Goodness
if it had something
gracious.
to do. If there was a good community story.
Looks like I'm stretching into your picture, Lori.
I know. Oh, I
know.
Touch.
I was like, wait, those are my nails.
Touching greatness.
I think these are really cool pictures. All right, so I just wanted to share my community story. So 19 months ago, my 3 children stopped mattering anymore because one of them gave me a grandchild. And when she was born early. And so I had all these plans because there was SharePoint Fest in DC where I live. She was going to be born the week after. Everything was going to be fine. She decided to make an early appearance. And unfortunately, the day they were going to take her home from the hospital, I flew out immediately, and I was going to fly back to DC. But the day they were going to take her home from the hospital, she stopped breathing and turned blue and CPR. So she didn't get to come home. And at that point, my daughter is a basket case. She's in the NICU, so everything is going to be fine. But I had this commitment in DC, and they live in LA, and I knew where I needed to be. I reached out to 2 people who have become my friends, but I met in the community, and asked them, hey, look, I am not going to get to my session, but I'll Skype it. Would you guys work the room? And would you be willing to do that? I'm going to fly home, do my workshop. We'll test the tech, and then I got to fly back to LA. And are you willing to do that? Literally 2 minutes after I sent the email, they're both all in. I emailed the conference organizer and said, look, I've got a problem, but I've solved the problem. And it was amazing. Everything worked. And now I have my 19-month-old little baby who I spend tons of time with and totally love, but hand back to her mom. So it's really all good. So I want to introduce you to my panel of community rock stars. Amazing, amazing people in the community. And I'm going to let them start out by introducing themselves and sharing a story about what community means to you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Sydney Andrews. I'm an Azure MVP and a Microsoft certified trainer. And my picture is absolutely insane up there, right? So I kind of grew and evolved as I started going out into the community. I was a consultant at a consulting firm back home. I'm from Richmond, Virginia, so small as small can get. And I went to my first Tech Ed conference, got my first certifications. Went to my second Tech Ed conference. I became a Microsoft certified trainer. This was my third Tech Ed conference. I was invited to come and teach other people about certification. So I never worked a conference before, never helped out. And they said, oh, you got to take your official picture. My official picture? What are you talking about? Oh, you can't look at what's on the board. Okay. What's your certification number? I gave him my certification number, and then I found out on Twitter that I committed crimes against technology. Still trying to figure out what that is, but just the community saying, hey, let's have some fun, let's break the ice. You're clearly new here, and we want you to feel welcome. That's one of the best parts of the community, and I always loved that picture.
Awesome.
I had to really zoom in to go, oh, that's not a real mugshot. I was like, I want to know about this story. I'm Anna Chu. I am the community lead here at Microsoft Ignite. I think some of you follow me on Twitter. It's been blowing up a little bit, but it's been a lot of fun. This photo, this was taken in Tokyo Halloween. I can't remember what year. I was dressed up as the Queen of Dragons, Daenerys Targaryen, and I have been called the community Khaleesi, so I figured I would put that photo up in there. I've been doing community for about 4 years now at Microsoft, and I started community with the MVP program, Office Apps and Services we call it now, that particular award category. And initially I was like, I don't know, these guys seem like they really know each other, but they've been super welcoming. And as I got to know them as people. And for me, community is 100% about people. You cannot have community without them. And I've really been floored by people being very generous with their time and their energy to just help each other out. And I think that's one of the cornerstones of what our Microsoft communities have done, is that we're all here invested in everybody else's success, and we really want to support them professionally as well as personally. I've heard many stories of people, where they've been let go from their company or had some health problems. The community from Microsoft, not necessarily employees, but certainly people are willing to lend a helping hand. So that's really humbling.
Yep, absolutely. And your husband looks really pumped at the picture, by the way.
Yeah.
Good for you.
He likes to work out.
There you go. Hi, I'm Magnus Martinson. I'm a MVP and a regional director and all that, but I'm also one of the instigators, we like to call it, behind the Global Azure Bootcamp. And it's pretty big these days. Last year we had a lot of people joining us for the Global Azure Bootcamp, and really all credit goes to all the wonderful, fantastic community leaders out there in the world. 326 locations joined us worldwide on just one day in April last. And that means that our event probably touched about at least more than 20,000 people on just one single day. On this day, we dwarf Microsoft on social media. We have 20x their numbers on social media, but it's just one day. Anyway, it's a pretty big event, and we've been going for some years now. It's 8 years in. Some of my best friends I've met through this, and we keep coming back to this event year by year, doing it over and over again, because we found out we really cannot not do it. We have to. It's so good. It's so much fun, and there's a lot of community and camaraderie and friendship involved there. Like I said, some of my best friends. And then everywhere we go, we get these wonderful stories. Someone comes up to us and says, I run the boot camp in so-and-so, and we did this and this, and this is the best event each year that we run, and really helps us or just gives us the strength they give us of their passion to share their stories with us. So one gentleman came up to me here at Ignite. We have a booth, by the way. Anyone wants to come over and talk about Global Azure and the community stuff, we have a booth in the Community Central. And a gentleman comes over and he says that, yeah, he kind of angles into our booth. And I'm like, yeah, hello, sir, what's up? Where are you from and so forth? Yeah, I'm considering running one of these boot camps in the UK. I was like, that's wonderful. Do you know if there's any boot camp near you? Yeah, I actually attended some of the boot camps a couple of years ago, and that really helped me get started in my career, in my role, on my path, and so forth. And so now I've kind of grown into my role a little bit, and now I want to run my own boot camp. And I'm like, that's the most beautiful thing I've ever heard. It's absolutely lovely, isn't it? That's exactly what it is, right? So helping somebody along, helping them feel welcome, and empowering them, and then one day they're kind of standing on their own legs, and a lot of that is thank you, to the community.
That's awesome. As I sit here listening to all the stories, I'm trying to go through my millions of stories. There's so many great examples, but I'm Lori Popmeyer. I'm the community lead for Microsoft Teams. So I work with the MVPs, I work with the user groups globally, our community events that take place around the world, and then I also manage the Microsoft Teams section of the Microsoft Tech community. So Anna and I go way back. Anyway, there's so many stories, but for me, I think the essence of community is just feeling like you have somebody no matter where you go. I do a lot of traveling with my job, a lot of different conferences and events with our MVPs and community leaders around the world, and it's so cool thinking that I can go literally anywhere in the world. There's somebody there that I know that can take me around, show me places, have me at their home. I mean, it's so weird, right? Yeah. I've had MVPs come and stay at my house, in Portland. That's way less exciting than Munich. But, it's really, really fun to just know that you have somebody everywhere. I was in Wiesbaden, Germany for the collaboration summit there, the European Collab Summit in May. And I had this raging eye infection. Like, it was so gross. I started to feel it on the airplane. And it was like, God, something's happening. And I'm getting ready to present that week, right, on a pretty large stage. That's another story. But so it just started to get worse and worse. And anyway, Long story short, one of the MVPs helped me out, and Christina Wheeler, we went around, we spotted looking for a doctor, and the doctor that we got hooked up with was actually an acupuncturist, and that name was given to me by the conference organizer. I was so thankful. I was like, acupuncturist, okay, I'm just gonna roll with this. Maybe they know something, I don't know. So we sat in the waiting room, we had tea and fortune cookies, waiting for the acupuncturist. That was really fun. We bonded. I used Microsoft Translator to figure out the forms and everything. But anyway, we ended up going into the acupuncturist. She gives us the name of her own eye doctor. We go to her own eye doctor, and it all gets solved, and everything's fine. I present with half an eye, and it all worked out. But it was so nice that, you know, I had my community there to lean on. If I had been by myself and not known anybody, I would have been totally in the dark. I don't speak German. You know, there's so many things that could have gone wrong. It just feels good to know you have people around you. Yeah.
I'm curious, sharing that you were in Germany, do you see the differences between communities in different parts of the world? Sort of different ways that people connect? Cultural differences?
Yes.
Can you share any of those differences?
Yeah, so I've had the fortune to travel in, for instance, India and Nepal and places like that. Community expression is widely different in different cultures, absolutely. Unfortunately, in some cultures, there's a bit of prestige and jealousy. So when somebody gets to do something, there's like a slew of other people coming in asking the organizers, why did that person get to do that? I didn't get to do that. And then in other cultures, it's very, very including everyone and very welcome, and everybody's like, it's like a big hug. So yeah, there's a lot of difference in culture.
Any advice that you give? And how many people, anyone here run their own community? And what kind of advice would you give people for dealing with people from multiple cultures or countries?
Yeah, well, we have to think about this really thoughtfully for Microsoft Ignite the Tour, because we're going to 30 different cities around the world, and we're thinking about community in that way. And absolutely the approaches to community are different worldwide. We're going to be going to Tokyo in our second stop, and the way that they run communities is very formal. It almost and which is very different to the way it happens in America, where it's very organic and people just turn up, and it's just very different. And you just have to be very cognizant of what the local cultures are. And the first thing you need to do is just listen and actually reach out to someone in the community and go, hey, like, how do you do things? What is the community landscape as it is in this particular country? So we're still learning. I'm still learning as well. So, and also online platforms are also an interesting thing too. As we've been doing tours for quite some time now, like you start to learn that, hey, sometimes Twitter is not the way to try and do any social outreach. It's actually more Instagram or WeChat or something else. So, yeah, I think we just need to have someone on the ground, and luckily for us, we have connections with people in these global communities who can tell us what it's like in those places.
Actually, I'm kind of glad you brought up online communities, because there's some of us, we're not internationally well-traveled like everybody else. I think the furthest I've been from the US was Toronto, and I was so excited to go there. But the online communities are kind of my way to connect with the rest of the world. And so there's this wonderful, really great Azure Slack channel, AzureD, right, .io. And going on that Slack channel, sometimes somebody will talk about something, and then we realize that, there's maybe some differences in pricing or how we talk about currency, or there's some differences in the way people refer to things, or I might be talking about a security thing, and it's different in the UK than it is in the US. So it was an old family saying that, hey, you know, well, not everybody, but many of us have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so you listen twice as much as you talk, and you just listen, give other people the opportunity to tell you about what's different for them, and to make it easier for you to respond and be inclusive. If you jump in and make assumptions, sometimes you just jump the wrong way. So it's way easier to say, hey, what did I get wrong? Hey, people love to tell you about, you know, what their culture is like, how things are for them. People just love sharing that type of information. I've just found that pretty universally. So if you're willing to listen, people will train you, teach you, and help you understand how to deal with global communities.
And I think what's wonderful about that is that since the furthest away you've been from the US is Toronto, you feel like you've got friends all around the world, right? So you don't feel like completely isolated. There are people who also share your passion, also share your interests that you can reach out to.
Oh yeah, if I want to look really cool amongst my friends, I tell them about Magnus. Yeah, I got a friend on the other side of the world.
You know, it's funny, you bring up the online community, and there's a couple of MVPs who actually met online, like not relationship, right? Like friendship. Because they were in the tech community and they were answering questions in the tech community, and both of them, it got to be this, race to see who could answer the question the fastest. And they kind of had this friendship that grew out of that. And then they both became MVPs this year. And we just had our airlift in Bellevue a couple of months ago, and they were roommates there, and they had never met. And they told me they were roommates, and I was like, wow, you guys got close. Like that tech community brought you together, and they are great friends now. And it's so fun to know that just their involvement in community and using their knowledge to share with others became this friendship.
But I think there's a difference between online communities and in person, because just like with anything online, you don't get the nuance when you're communicating that way. Laurie, I don't think you sleep, because I see what goes on in the team's MVP community. So how are you making sure, or what advice do you have for people participating online?
Well, I think just MVPs aside, just being able to share your knowledge is a real gift. And I don't know if anybody walked by the community area, Anna, that was so nice of you to post that quote, because it really is a big deal to me. I feel like there's a quote on the wall, if you haven't been there, with a bunch of pictures of people that have given their thoughts about what community means to them. And at some point, I tweeted out that community really, or your knowledge, all the knowledge that all of us have here is a true gift. And when we share that, we're sharing that out of passion for the products that we represent or that we're knowledgeable about, that we're experts about. And being able to go out and whether you go to events or you have your user group, those are all obviously wonderful ways to share your knowledge. But a really easy way to do it is online. And I think that's kind of the gateway, right? The gateway to community, the gateway to being an expert is being able to just share your knowledge. And I think sometimes we think we're maybe not the expert, right? There's people that know more, there's people that are better at things. And the reality is that every one of us in this room has something to share. And sometimes we let our egos get the best of us, and we don't want to share because we don't want it, we want to be perfect. And my advice is always just share your knowledge. Be proactive. Go in the Microsoft Tech community and just give tips and tricks. Hey, you messed up. Share that with other people, because they're going to learn from you, right? Sometimes it's even something that goes wrong. And I think, just being able to get over, being shy or, not wanting to share, thinking that somebody is not going to think your information is important, and just get your information out there and share with people, and don't let that be a blocker, because somebody's going to learn that. Somebody's going to learn something from you.
And actually, Scott Hanselman said in his diversity and inclusion session, his quote was, everyone is an expert in something. So I think if you have a generous heart, if you feel like you have something to share, just put it out there. And I know not everyone is super brave about that. So we, as online community managers, we know we have lots of lurkers. There are plenty of people who are just there listening in, and that is totally fine. But once you strike up the courage to put something together, to reply, and you see the flood of positive responses that come from that, that really encourages people to participate more. So my advice to anyone in this room who participates in online communities, kind of reward people for taking the opportunity to engage, because that was their first step, and they were probably pretty nervous about it.
So how do you handle when maybe someone says something that's not so kind?
Yeah, that happens.
Honestly, it doesn't happen all that often, though. In this space, I have not often come across that. And in those occasions, you might take that person aside. But one thing that is so good is that most people who are in this sharing game, who want to participate in the community and want to share, we're adults, right? And we're there for the tech. I don't know how often times you have had issues with this, but I would say relatively few, as compared to maybe having a conversation on, I don't know, Facebook. People will be jerks immediately, but I think people actually mostly
But I
there.
think a lot of our communities that we're all part of are there. Yeah, do you have? Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Come on up.
You want to have mine? Here's a mic.
Look, community in action. Magna's sharing his mic.
No, so a lot of time people are not commenting for the negative reason and all that, but because they are not aware of the social and the diversified information, which is like, good for country India, but not good here, good here, but not good in there. It's often hard for me in terms of bridge that gap. Like, how do you do that? Like, do you have any mechanism? Do you have any tools? Do you have anything which can help me? Like, hey, this name or this meaning of this name is like, I can take a lot of examples, okay? But like, I don't know if it will be appropriate here for those examples, but those words are not appropriate
Right.
when it comes to here. Okay, and they use it in a flow, right? It's not like they're just using that word. They're putting up a thought or responding to something, and they put a word which is completely different meaning here. Okay, I wish something can happen where all these online communities can identify this, say that, hey, it's different meaning in these countries than, the country where it is getting originated from. Okay.
First of all, thank you for elaborating on that. I believe good people can say terrible things and completely not mean it. The biggest thing I learned after years of, well, how do we softly handle this is you got to be aggressive handling it because there's no way other people can learn. So a really good example of this is actually today on Twitter, somebody shared that they were at a booth and somebody saw a woman at the booth and said, hey, can you show me a technical person? I have a question. And after all the gifts and stuff finished, there were some people apologized. Were like, oh, he didn't really mean that. You could assume sometimes people working at a booth aren't technical. They're like, that's not the problem. The problem was that he made that assumption. And we could handle it with soft hands, but then nobody learns anything. I'm not perfect. I'm going to probably 2-3 years from now, I'm probably going to terrify somebody in an event organizer and make a mistake and say something wrong. But if you address it, if you tackle it, and you make it very vocal so other people can learn from it, that's the key to improving. I mean, we got a long journey before we can get to the inclusivity level that we should be at. And the only way to start that journey is for everyone to be vocal and everybody to learn about not just the way you should include other people, but the way you should address other people. And
What about community guidelines? Do any of you have sort of guidelines for playing in our community? Because partially I think what you're talking about is being aware that you're in a community where people don't all speak the same language, where the same word that you use may have a very different meaning in that country, even if you speak the same language. So witness me when I was in college thinking I was being so polite with my British friends saying that I had to go put something in my fanny pack. So never gonna do that again. But sort of having sort of a rules of the road. And we have that for the MVP community, but do any of you guys have, is that what you mean? And do you have such a thing? Does anyone have such a thing?
Yes. Is it working now?
Yeah.
Sounds like it.
Okay, so yes, we do put the rules in, but like we don't want to restrict anybody in terms of community is a very open, It's not like your official deliverable where, oh, you have to read everything before you can code, or you need to get all your unit tests before you can code. So it's not a very formal way. And oftentimes, even though we put together something, but there is somebody who just joined. And very energetic, like, fresh out of college or fresh out of school, and like, and typed something, okay?
Does your community have a moderator who will reach out and welcome new members and remind them of the guide?
Absolutely, yes. Yes, we do that. And we do send out all that information in terms of, hey, here is what our guidelines are. Here is like, talk to somebody before, commenting on some sensitive topic out there. Because these systems are like, sometimes we talk about the systems as well. And those systems are not like developed 20 years back, okay? And we have just built on top of it. So, there are things, guidelines, but, it's people are people. Like, they just, and it's not like they're knowing what they're doing. And that's where the problem comes. So if you guys are aware of any tools, any processes, any technologies, which you have done in your past or like, in the recent.
Yeah, I would say that actually we don't use tools and technologies. We would use people. we used community managers, real human beings who are there to really decipher the nuance of that particular situation. For some specific countries, the way a conversation is perceived may seem really rude or blunt, but the way that person was expressing it did not mean that, and they just did not realize, hey, the person on the other end of that conversation was not the best recipient of, like, they didn't perceive it the way they meant. So having a community manager to help understand what the situation is and sort of triaging what's going on, and to go back to that original commenter or the person who replied, say, look, like, this is a situation, you could have replied in a different way. Just understand that this community, we have a policy, and I highly recommend that if anyone runs an online community or even a in-person community, that you have some rules. You have, not necessarily terms of service, but definitely code of conduct guidelines, that type of thing.
I know you're dying to share.
Yeah, you kind of, I'm sorry. So basically you kind of touched on it like in your last two sentences, but I run a few communities, a few in person and one like it's very fresh one, it's online. One of the biggest things that I want from the group is that everything should be inclusive. The group is for everyone, everybody should feel safe. So whenever somebody new joins, we have a code of conduct. We'll point them to the code of conduct. We'll have them ask a few questions like, hey, who are you? What do you do? And then some random question like, what's your favorite food or whatever, sort of conversation starter. But the code of conduct, in my opinion, is the most important thing because it's not necessarily a set of rules. It's just a sort of, this is important because everybody should feel comfortable. Like, my community is called Meetup Mates, and it's basically a sort of online group for people to find other people to go to meetups with so they don't go by themselves. Cool. And yeah, it's quite fun. But the thing is, like, I feel like in the diversity space, like there's a lot of groups that are kind of forgotten, and everybody has their own reasons why they don't go to certain events or something like that. So Meetup Mate is more like everybody needs to feel comfortable and safe. So I think if you put a set of rules in and you keep them, like you call them rules, like if you break the rules, then you do this. And it's also kind of like, we're all operating in the blameless culture, kind of like people have a reason for doing certain things. So I would recommend the code of conduct. But the most important thing about the code of conduct, sorry.
Do you call it a code of conduct?
Yeah,
I've
I've got a website. I've got like pointed there. So it's very, it's based on code of conduct that lots of like tech events use. But I think the more important thing is to know what to do when the code of conduct is violated. So I recently had an issue with that for the first time. I've been running this community since May. We've got like over 200 people on it now, which is quite cool. But one guy, because it's like it's meant to find other people. And at some point something happened and I was like, I'm not quite sure how to deal with this. So one of the members messaged me privately saying, hey, there's this guy from India or whatever he's from, somewhere from not around London, because like the group is based for people and finding people to go to meetups with. So he was, you're more than welcome to join in on a conversation, but apparently he's been messaging people privately to ask for work. And one of the rules, or one of the things in the code of conduct, and the do's and the don'ts, is you don't sell your services. It's just a, don't ask people for things that they're not comfortable with. And I asked my member, like, how would you want me to solve this? Like, it's not really, So basically I just like crowdsourced an answer, and I basically put a message on the random channel saying like, hey, if this is a friendly reminder, this community is meant for these things. And then somebody, like 2 other people messaged me saying like, hey, this has happened to me as well. So I had a private message to this person saying like, hey, just as an FYI, please don't do this again because this is not what it's for. But I still feel like I'm not quite sure how to deal with certain code of conduct violations. So hopefully one of you have a suggestion for that.
First off, thank you for sharing that example. I tell you, rules are weird because people like to write rules but don't like to enforce them. It's just uncomfortable enforcing. It's wonderful to write them, and when it's time to enforce them, it sucks. And so one of the things I learned over the years is that process is a little bit more important than rules. If you have a process, if somebody feels uncomfortable, there's a place they can go, somebody they can talk to, some type of arbitration or fairness there, then even if somebody says, oh, they excommunicated me from the community because of this and that, well, we followed the process, and you got a certain amount of opportunities. It's easier to enforce when you have a process. And I always recommend, if your code of conduct just has a set of rules and no process, you should look into that. Saying, okay, what happens if somebody's uncomfortable? If everyone in your, let's say you have like your community, online community, everyone should know where to go if they feel uncomfortable. And if they don't, then maybe we should improve the visibility of that hyperlink or email address or IM link. Then once you get a complaint, who handles it? Is it one person? Is it two people? Is it a group of people? What do you make public? What do you keep private? What do you do if it happens again and again? I see it on both sides. Sometimes, you'd be surprised how often the process can help us find people and they accidentally said something, and then we can inform them, educate them a little bit privately. They can reach out to the person, apologize if the process allows that person. Sometimes it's anonymous. It just depends. It depends on what you decide. But on the other end, you always get the runaways, the person who knows what they're doing. And we get that sometimes, the person who always trying to find a way to light a fire. And a process protects you from that, because if you don't have a process, eventually they're going to game you, and they're going to keep doing offensive things that challenge you to kick them out of the community. And then if you kick them out of the community, the things they're going to say. But if you have a process, and there's like, even if it's as simple as a 3-strike system, it's easier for you to say, look, we gave you all the opportunity in the world. We really tried to make you a part of the community. And this is, if somebody asks why that person is no longer in the community, here, it's in plain English. So process helps a lot.
Have you guys ever had to kick anyone out of a community that you're leading?
Yeah, so I lead the Microsoft tech community, and it's quite a big community now. It's grown since we launched in 2016, and so we've definitely seen everything. And luckily, I have some real human beings as community managers who are there to manage any complaints. Like, we'll definitely get messages that are flagged as inappropriate, and we have process to manage that. But we are very clear on two things. One, our community charter and what we're about. So when we do talk about, what the Microsoft Tech community is, how inclusive we are, people are here to share knowledge, to share their questions and get community-sourced answers. People know why they should be there, why they should be in the room. And we have a code of conduct to say, this is the types of behavior that we accept and the behavior that is not acceptable. So it's clearly documented. There's no point in arguing this is how it is. And so when it comes to a point where we do have to, unfortunately, ban someone from the community, we can just say, look, like, this is the behavior we saw. We'll first try and understand the reasons why. Maybe it was unintentional. And, we do have a 3 strikes policy, but documentation, being very clear to the person why they violated, why we perceived them as violating that code of conduct. And so they know, we didn't just boot them out for no reason. So communication, process, being very transparent about how we do things is what's important.
I think when anybody's behind a screen, it's so much easier to say things that you wouldn't say to their face. Right? And one place that we see it is user voice, because people have a lot of opinions on what we should be doing with the product.
You think?
They do. Yeah. So they have lots of ideas about Microsoft Teams and what should be coming, and sometimes we see the, I'm behind a screen and I'm just going to tell you exactly how I feel, completely unfiltered. And it's okay when it's done in a constructive manner, right? But when it's not constructive and it's, threatening or, talking about individuals and you guys are stupid and this and that, it's just like, And yeah, it's interesting to hear how it's dealt with. And I think that people are the way you have to deal with that. But what's nice is if you're using a system where those messages can be flagged, so that then you can deal with it. And it's, in user voice, a tool like user voice, they can, people can flag it. And in the tech community, which is nice, but having that human being to go and kind of go through those things and address them individually is important. But we definitely see it in user voice.
I work with, I'm a consultant, so I work with a lot of organizations, and because communities of practice are really my thing, I've worked with a lot of organizations on their Yammer code of conduct. Because boy, if you think out in the world it's an issue, try getting past the lawyers in like an insurance company where you're trying to introduce the concept of community inside of an organization. And you're really right. You need not only the contract that you're effectively the code of conduct, but you also need a process for how you deal with violations and the teachable moment that you have an opportunity. And what I always tell executives is that by the time it comes out in Yammer, it is just the tip of the iceberg of something that there have been way other things going on. Yeah. This is going to make it more visible because you have people who are going to catch it on your behalf.
And I think too, to that point, once they are talked to, somebody who violates something like that, once they have a human being reach out to them, they feel awful, right? Then it's like, oh gosh, people are reading this, and now I'm busted, not in trouble, but now they are real people who are reading this. And I think once they understand that, that's like, okay, I learned that, now I'm not gonna act that way again.
All right, I want to switch to a happy topic. So one of the things I think about community that can often be very intimidating is if you don't know anyone and you want to become part of a community. So before I ask you guys, I'm going to ask if anyone out there has a tip for anybody who wants to join a community where they don't know anyone.
Come on down. This is actually the test. Yeah. You join in our community, right. Give everybody tips on joining other communities.
I have joined many communities, and just to tell you guys a story about my software career. So I was very little knowing about software, and the first time I got my computer, I needed some space in C:, so I deleted the WinNT folder itself. So that's how, and then I figured out I need to learn a lot. So for me personally, I just started joining all those tech communities and started asking questions. Of course, it's very intimidating in terms of I don't know about something, but I have made bad choices in life, so that's okay. Okay, so it's like, it's really good, because when you are making bad choices like deleting a WinNT folder, somebody is going to tell, no, those are system files. You should not be deleting it. So, and it's really a learning opportunity. So if you are lost ever, it's just go. Don't put your tip on the water, just dive in. Okay, so that's my recommendation.
Yeah. All right,
thank you.
Else?
Anybody else sharing? I mean, I can talk. So I'm very fortunate in where I have no issues talking to people. I can go into a room and I can literally talk to anyone. I know this, but there's a lot of people in London that I also know that are a bit more introverted or anything like that. So I try to use what I am good at to help people get in. And if I have my in-person meetings, like with media mates, we had a social a while ago. And one of the things that I always like since DevOps days last year, is the Pac-Man. If you're having a conversation, and if you're it's a social event, if you have everybody in the group, if you have a Pac-Man, make sure there's space enough for one person to join in, so they feel welcome and you can just join in. And one of the other things that I like doing, if it's just like a social event, is to make sure you talk to a few people that you haven't spoken to before. But yeah, so I think I'm not going to call it allyship, but it's more kind of like, if you know that you can talk to people better than other people can, and it's not like I can just hey, have you met this person, and have them chat and then carry on again. So it's just somebody, like a conversation starter. I think that's helping the people who can do it versus the people who are less inclined to do so.
But what if you're not in the room to help someone? You guys have an idea? Well, let's do in-person and online. Here we are in person, and people are going to probably have an opportunity to go to
come on down,
events or parties or.
So one thing that I found that I think helps a lot is if you're coming into a new community and you can find one person in that community that shares something with you, whether it is your race or a shared career experience or a shared interest or something, and then you can just get talking to that person about that thing, and then you do that for a while until you're just comfortable in the space, and then you're in the space, and then everything else kind of flows out of that.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, it does. And for people who are more, for instance, the people up here on stage, not many introverts here.
Actually, that's not true.
Yeah, 100%.
I am an introvert, actually.
Yes, but
I'm going
I'm a
everywhere
forced
with you.
extrovert.
let me put it. Let me rephrase. You're actually people who dare be on this stage. That's kind of more what I meant. And in a community space, people like us who have actually gotten past our terrors about actually talking to strangers and stuff can be a really good helper there, except we, of course, have to remind ourselves to do it gently. I don't know, I've never had an introvert thought in my life, but that's just how I am, right? And I can come off as incredibly intimidating to people who are introverts, and I've learned that over the years, of course, that I can come off as a steamroller, though I don't intend to. I never meant to harm anyone, right? But I've managed to, over the years, learn how to tone that down in the scenario where there are people that are very carefully approaching something, right? I can't jump out and scare them off. They're gonna run away screaming. So really, I mean, it's just so many different types of people, and when you're dealing with people that are more shy and not easily approach communities in this case, really taking a deep breath and stepping out of yourself, trying to listen more, like you said, and trying to be a little gentle until the people feel more comfortable. It's not easy because, you know, they can't help being introvert and I can't help being extrovert, right?
I have a very specific example related that kind of is in between the worlds of online and the physical world. So right now, this session is being live streamed, and there's a whole bunch of people probably listening on the other side of that camera. And one of the things that I tweeted out today, no, actually 2 days ago, I just wanted to find out who was on the other side of that camera, and I just said, hey, can you, if you're watching this live stream, give us a selfie and just share that out so we can see you. And people did. And actually, then people start recognizing there are real humans out there, that they can actually have a conversation about their live stream experience, what they're learning, what their thoughts are. And we really need to try and bridge that gap between online and the physical, because we know for sure that when people start, and we've got so many stories where people started in online communities and then they become roommates at the next community event. You know, like it starts there, but also I think it can be tough when, you know, your first entry point into community is actually through a physical meetup or a user group and you don't know anyone. So that Pac-Man tip is amazing. Like I had never heard of it before.
Share with everybody.
Please.
So good, yes.
It's so good. Like open it, because when you see that click of people, you're like, oh, I don't know. But if you suddenly, there's a physical signal saying, hey, you are welcome here,
Yeah.
it's so important.
People who are standing in a circle have their backs outwards, right? So
Yeah,
people
and they
can't
don't realize.
get in,
Actually,
right?
I learned something from Betsy. I can't believe you're not getting up, because you posted something a while ago about how you should stand when you're chatting with people in any kind of a meetup like this. Stand in a semicircle, not in a circle. Because a C, right? A U. Be the
Yeah.
you.
Okay, interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
That works as well. Same as the Pac-Man.
It's,
Works
yeah, it's
also.
exactly what you said, but the physical barrier that you create to that new person trying to come in, I wouldn't cross the circle, but I might feel more comfortable.
If I can quickly share, I had this great opportunity once, when it was kind of new to run WordPress sites on Azure. This is some years ago now, but that was kind of new, so I was giving a presentation about that, and it was online at the same time as well. So I guided, there was a demo walkthrough steps. I guided the people to do that, to create these things. And first of all, I created a WordPress blog engine during my talk, and I gave out the password publicly on the live stream, and I said, post something, and I got pictures of communities posted in my blog stream. So maybe not that example exactly, but try to figure out a way, work that into your scheme. If you have somebody on the other end of that wire, try to figure out a way to, well, include them too, right? Doesn't have to be this example. This was a happy coincidence, but it turned out really well. I got pictures from like everywhere in the world. It was beautiful. But that's something like that. It can be done.
Excellent. We are basically out of time. So I'm going to give you guys here's my final thought. If community was a movie, what movie represents your feelings or thoughts about community? Or if you just feel like sharing, what movie should everybody go see?
Okay, we're going in that order. All right. So this is going to be really weird, but the usual suspects. So there's two reasons for that, a good and a bad one. The good reason is that a lot of people you see that lead communities, do online events, MVPs and stuff like that, they're the same people who contribute all the time, and they're recognized and they're encouraged, and they continue to do that. But the bad side of it is the usual suspects. We still have a long way to go in representation. The people who are at the head of the communities aren't proportional and representative of the people in the communities. It's just not there yet. I'm African American, and I can count on one hand the amount of African American people who lead communities in Measure. And Magnus and I were even having a conversation just before this session about the amount of women in the space that we're in. And not saying, oh, there should be more. That's not enough. How? How do we bring people into the space? How do we become more inclusive? How do we become more representative? So usual suspects, both the good and the bad reason.
Okay, I thought of one.
All right.
Being John Malkovich. Have you ever seen that movie? So basically, John Cusack finds this tunnel behind a file cabinet, and when he goes through that tunnel, he becomes John Malkovich. And so it kind of relates to community, because you do get a chance to reinvent yourself in a way. So when you go into an online community or go somewhere where nobody really knows you, you can kind of like start afresh. You can just present yourself as a particular person or present yourself as your true self. And people are actually generally pretty accepting, pending the charter of that community, etc. But some people have a lot of baggage, like from who they were at high school. But I feel that a community is so accepting. If you wanted to completely reinvent yourself and find a whole bunch of new friends, you can find that in community. So that's pretty wonderful.
Yes, it is. Absolutely. So I'm going to segue off of About a Boy, because in my opinion, for most of us, it's too late, right? I mean, we're once we were young and idealistic, right? And most of that has gone away in both sense. But looking to the next generation and trying to figure out how to encourage them to get into tech, because there's a lot of people that needs to get into tech, and specifically diverse people need to get into tech because it's terrible right now. And in that way, the thing that makes me hopeful for the future, honestly, is to be present in that space where the kids are, whatever age they might be young adults as well, but somewhere along that path, right? Not professional yet. And maybe the light is there. Realistic light is there in their eyes still, right? It hasn't died yet, right? and to be there, to given the opportunity to amplify that if you can. And that's kind of actually a little bit what happens in this movie with this very introvert, awkward, socially awkward boy that gets help from this adult, right? And to be there to amplify that light is a great gift. That makes me hopeful for the future.
Awesome. Lori, wrap it up.
Okay, so I don't think Hallmark movies really count. So no, I'm going to go off of, trust me, I'm a big Hallmark movie fan, but I don't know if anybody else is.
Every one of those Christmas movies.
Right? The holiday movies are good. They're always happy, right? So anyway, I'm going to go off the movie a little bit. I'm just going to challenge everybody in the room and all of us. And something that I try to do is going along with diversifying who our speakers are when we have user groups and community events is, if you have the opportunity to speak, or if you have the opportunity to organize an event and are looking for speakers, to get new blood in there, but also to encourage people that haven't spoke before. So one of the things that I do when I go to a community event that I just started a couple of months ago, and the first time was in Colombia, I went to an event, is I found a young woman who was going to school to be in IT, and brought her with me as my guest for the day and had her shadow me as a speaker. And I think opportunities like that, where we can bring somebody in from the local community to the event, but also for speakers who are doing this all the time and really experienced, or if you're an organizer, having the same people come, challenge them or ask them to bring somebody that may be new to the speaker world to come and join them as a, helping with Q&A or as a demo assistant or, somebody that can share a story or engage a little bit with the audience and give them the opportunity. And I think sharing opportunity and bringing people in, especially if you can bring somebody that's not like you, is a really good opportunity.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Let's give these rock stars of community a big hand. Thank you all for coming all the way to the end of the hall in order to be part of this community panel. Thanks so much.
Thank you.